a rebellion in heaven, a race of fallen angels. Ancient biblical scriptures calls them the sons of God, the watcher angels. They chose the beauty of earthly women over the beauty of heaven, an unholy union that brought about the birth of giants, a race of beings known as the Nephilim. We travel the world looking for archaeological, cultural, even spiritual traces of the existence of these angels and these giants, left on earth during the days of their debaucherous existence, beings whose allegorical and even physical handprints still remain in our midst, those whose presence still remains behind the thinnest of veils that separate us from a neighboring dimension. Thousands of miles, one crew, one television series in the making. We're chasing angels and giants, the Watchers and the Nephilim. If you happen to run into me while I'm painting an image of the Eiffel Tower in Paris on a Sunday afternoon and we strike up a conversation, and the following Saturday you run into me as I'm painting an image of the Statue of Liberty in New York City, and again we strike up a conversation, I think we can both safely deduce that we both traveled that week from Paris to New York even before the subject matter comes up. Why? Because it's blatantly evident that there was an intentional migration of the same intelligent being to create something similar on a different continent of the planet. When you notice that my painting style is unmistakably unique to me, however, you realize that you probably would have suspected who the artist was even if we had not run into each other in New York City. Hi, I'm Tim Ross. If the ruins of an ancient civilization that predates airplanes, the internet, GPS, the telephone, laser, etc., exhibits unbelievably unique and unmistakable traits to the ruins of a different civilization across the planet, would you have the similar reaction to my example of the paintings? Furthermore, what if the details of said traits were so complex, mind-blowing, and unexplainable that they were equally an absolute enigma on both continents? Would it not lead you to believe that the same beings shared the same techniques and technologies? Would it not lead you to believe that these beings came from the same origins or were in some way related to each other? In this look into the conclusion of our 2-year expedition to film a television series and to investigate the Watchers and the Nephilim, we first conclude our work in the Sacred Valley of Peru. Next, our work takes us to northern Africa, to the mind-blowing mysteries often buried in the sands of Egypt. The conclusion of angels and giants, the Watchers and the Nephilim. This morning, the team gets an early start for the trip to the one place that is an absolute must for anyone investigating megalithic Peru, the majestic and mysterious Machu Picchu.
Damas y caballeros, su atención por favor.
The trip is an hour-long train ride from Ollantaytambo to the town of Aguas Calientes at the base of the mountain. The final leg is a bus ride from Aguas Calientes up the mountain on a treacherous winding road, all the way to the entrance of the Machu Picchu complex. To say that Machu Picchu is breathtaking is an understatement. To anyone who sets foot in the ancient city, it becomes silently evident just why it is considered a World Heritage Site.
It was abandoned in about 1535 AD when word came from the city of Cuzco, which was the Inca capital, that Spanish people had arrived and they were wreaking havoc. And so there are two main roads that give you access to Machu Picchu. The one in front of me here goes to Cuzco, and then there's another one that wraps around the mountain, goes across a drawbridge and up and over mountain ranges into the jungle to a site called Vilcabamba. So the people of this site abandoned it, and from then until about 1911, Machu Picchu lay dormant, and nobody knew that it existed.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. If you look out the left-hand side of the aircraft, you'll see the ancient city of Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu was rediscovered in the 20th century.
A Latin American history professor from Yale by the name of Hiram Bingham is officially credited for discovering the lost city of Machu Picchu in July of 1911. Its terraces, its walls, intricate waterways, and overall construction is attributed to the Incas and said to have been built between 1450 and 1460 AD as a fortress and a place to hide from the Spanish conquistadors, who, according to Bingham, may never even have found.
The other intriguing thing about it is that the term Machu means ancient in the Inca language, but Picchu is actually not in the Inca or Quechua language. It's in a language which has disappeared called Capac-Simi, which was the royal Inca language. So I think they did that as a type of code, that if local people, if someone inquired, do you know where Machu Picchu is, they would say, ancient what? We don't know what you're talking about. In terms of how long did it take to construct, the standard story is 30 years. The problem with that is that the cathedral in Cuzco took 100 years, and this site is square miles in scale. And so it's much more likely that it took hundreds of years and that the Inca originally found it as an abandoned megalithic site. It even appears as if the top of the mountain has been cut off somehow, because if you look in the surroundings, you see all the mountains are beautifully domed. But we have these huge flat spaces here. This is solid granite bedrock. So it seems apparent that the original megalithic builders had extremely powerful advanced technology, able to terraform solid stone and then build the megalithic core of this sacred space.
But the lesser-known fact is that Machu Picchu has a megalithic core that often goes overlooked, unnoticed, and unappreciated by those who visit it. First of all, can you describe this structure for me?
Well, I have no idea what it was because it only has 3 sides. You know, most buildings have 4 sides, and there doesn't appear to have been a roof because the top of the stones are flat. This place gets lots, you know, this is the high jungle. This place gets a lot of rain. So that's why the Inca had very high peaked roofs in order to shed all of that rain. So we know that it's a pre-Inca construction because of the quality of the workmanship and also the sheer scale of the stones and the fact that they fit super tightly together, except over here on the left-hand side.
And what happened there?
Well, the wall has been pulled apart, and the left side is 2 feet farther down than the right side. So I was here with a geologist, and she said on the left-hand side you had liquefaction of the foundation that caused the whole wall to sink down by 2 feet, and thereby pulling itself apart. And again, she said, if this had happened during Inca times, the entire city would have been destroyed.
But because the construction is so strong, so well done, it stayed together to a degree. Can you talk about this massive stone that seems to be a base, almost an altar right behind you?
Well, that's what they call it. They call it an altar. It's not part of the bedrock. It's a separate stone. So it was mined or quarried somewhere around here. They call it an altar because it's got a flat surface and it's big. The bigger question is, how is it shaped and how is it moved in position? Because it weighs probably 30 to 40 tons. And actually Thor Heyerdahl did a really good experiment on Easter Island because of the giant statues that are there. They were able to find a 1-ton block, and they had wooden rollers. And he wanted to find out how many strong men it would take to move a 1-ton block on a flat surface. And it turned out to be 15. So this is 20 to 30 to 40 times 15 to be able to move it on a flat surface.
Can you talk a little bit about why this structure looks more decorative than many of the others around us?
Well, the protrusions that we can see, I don't know what the function of those were. That's again why these megalithic sites are so mysterious. But the intriguing thing is that behind this wall is a chamber that's quite big, and it's highly acoustic. It reacts to the tone of Om. Quite possibly they use this as a temple. They likely notice the acoustic nature of this. That would be perfect for a place of worship, because then the priest, when he was talking to the crowd, his voice would become louder and, almost like a supernatural kind of thing going on.
The issue of resonance seems to surface over and over again.
In general, yeah, whether in Peru or Egypt or in Bolivia as well. Either acoustics or resonance or energetics.
Can that be related to the whole idea of portals?
Yeah, I think so. And also, almost always the stone that was utilized was high in quartz crystal or high in iron or high in both. Like basalt, which we've seen, has quartz and iron in it. Both of those they have electrical, electronic properties to them, and quartz crystal is what runs everyone's watches and cell phones these days.
Indeed. We see evidence of the ancients even in the places that don't draw the crowds of spectators.
What we have here is what is called the ceremonial rock. And a lot of the guides will say that it was used for human sacrifice. What they don't understand is that there are no actual accounts of the Inca doing human sacrifice, because why would they? They had no specific god to appease to, and being masters of agriculture, as in geniuses of agriculture, they didn't have to pray for rain or anything like that. They knew exactly the cycles of weather that went on. They took records by these knotted cords called quipu, that extended for hundreds of years, and so they were obviously measuring cycles of rainfall, cycles of growth, etc. So I think it's more likely that it's a place of meditation, and also I believe that this is megalithic, as in pre-Inca, because the shaping of the surfaces is very nice, and it's very big, so how would they have physically moved it from the quarry to this location? The fact that this is here tells us that the megalithic aspect is probably larger than I'm aware of. Since this is jungle, and since only part of it has been excavated, it's quite possible that there are other megalithic sites in this immediate area along what's called the Inca Trail.
As we prepare for the long trip back to Cuzco, Brian insists on showing us one more detail on these huge stones. Ironically, this detail explains at least one part of this enigma, while at the same time further complicating another part of it.
This is another dead giveaway. This is where we see that there were two distinct cultures involved in the construction of Machu Picchu. You notice here the massive scale, once again, of the stonework. 20-ton blocks. When you look at the top, very small stones, very badly put together. So it's obvious that the Inca found this megalithic site damaged by a huge cataclysm 12,000 years ago that pulled once again the east and west walls apart, and then they built on top of it. Another thing is, thanks to the cataclysm, if we look in here, the joints between the stones are not straight lines, they are compound curves that locked the stones together. So this is a great example of that. It doesn't go simply straight in, it goes like that on one side, and the other side perfectly matches it and they fit together.
Somehow, the great builders of these walls were able to shape the touching parts so that their sides would fit like a spoon in a spoon. The fact that none of these stones are exactly the same adds a layer of mystery and a huge layer of complexity to the topic. The fit of these stones was actually customized, one stone at a time, and one side at a time. There are literally no firm explanations, and as such there is no reason to decisively dispute that the Watchers, perhaps keepers of secrets learned from the creator of the universe, did in fact leave these very ruins behind. Ruins which will likely be sitting here for another 10,000 years. If the case is being made for the Watchers having been the advanced civilization that left magnificent and mind-boggling megalithic witnesses behind, Egypt is perhaps the best case to be made for the strongest evidence for their scientific and mathematical prowess, to a supernatural degree. If the imposing megalithic stones of Cuzco astound with their sheer size and arrogantly precise crafting, the mysteries in Giza alone supersede all other megalithic wonders with its mysterious and astounding architectural, astronomical, and geometrical accuracies and attributes. There is an overabundance of commentary and research about the land of Egypt. Thousands, perhaps millions of books have been written about the pyramids. The theories of their construction, what it took, the obstacles that had to be overcome. Yet, comparatively speaking, little is ever discussed or officially theorized about the actual architects of the pyramids and the multitude of marvels found in this mysterious land. Sure, the usual mentions of pharaohs giving orders for gaudy and elaborate tombs, the thousands of laborers, slaves or otherwise, are always discussed. But when it's all said and done, does it really feel like it adds up? Many overlooked voices say, no, not always. Our team arrives in Egypt, and after a short stay in Cairo, we'll be heading south to Luxor first thing in the morning, consequently working our way back north.
How long are we expecting to drive now?
It depends with the traffic jam, but we might take 1 hour.
Arriving in Egypt is quite surreal.
I don't know anything about Luxor other than that it's south of here and it's smaller, much smaller than Cairo.
For as much as most of us have not been here before, we can't help but feel that our journey is already inherently woven with a thread of familiarity. It makes you wonder, what is happening in the spiritual realm at this very moment? Has someone noticed that we are looking specifically for their proverbial and maybe literal footprints? Are we now being trailed ourselves? We set out to find reasonable proof of the existence of beings who match the profile of the Watchers. Thus far, the credible proof that we found leaves us always asking, how? Egypt is sure to also raise those same questions, we suspect, with exponentially more urgent reasons for asking. We start our day early. We cross the Nile on a ferry to connect with our local friend and host. This is Stephen J. Wondering. Steve is an American author and researcher residing in Egypt. He allows us to tag along with his research group as we look for clues that point back to the Watchers, back to the Nephilim, back to the Garden of Eden and the War of the Seeds. This is the thrilling part. all of us will be keeping our eyes on the walls and on the millions of hieroglyphs for anything that catches our eye, anything that connects this land, these tombs, or the ancients of Egypt to Genesis 6, to the Nephilim, or to the Watchers. Hieroglyphs, or sacred carvings, have been decoded to a certain degree by discoveries such as the famed Rosetta Stone. However, inasmuch as they have been decoded, they have also proven to be a much more complex undertaking than a simple translation of the language, letter by letter or picture by picture. Context and intent matter in the meanings of the hieroglyphs, not to mention the fact that it was an ever-evolving language that spanned over 4,000 years. Within these writings, we oftentimes find accompanying depictions that reinforce the written narrative. Among the millions of symbols, we find curious details that catch the eye of anyone looking for traces of giants or watchers. There are theories that the larger-than-life beings on these walls represent the larger-than-life way that the pharaohs were seen by Egyptians. Steve has worked ahead of us and selected a few locations where we will be able to clearly see that the ancient Egyptians were, at the very least, aware of the conflict between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Underneath the brutal assault of the desert heat, sometimes hundreds of feet beneath ground level, there is a network of ancient tombs and chambers in which the treasures that still remain are etched on walls and on display, looking as vibrant as they did thousands of years ago.
Valley of the Kings kind of thing.
This was his tomb.
Is that like an ex-girlfriend or something?
Steve has brought us here to this chamber to show us a scene that has a direct correlation to the account of the declaration of war between the Son of God and the serpent in the Garden of Eden.
Is that the one there?
It's right there. So we're here in one of the tombs of the worker village. These are the workers for the Valley of the Kings, which is just over the hill out there. So what they have in these tombs, they would trade their artwork with each other. So they would hire for beer or whatever, they would hire one of the artisans to paint their tombs. And one of the idioms of the day, one of the things that was pretty common was this, where you have this, it's actually a rabbit ears on a cat figure, which represents the son of God, Horus. Horus, the heroic god of ancient Egypt. And what he is doing, you have the tree of life with the snake, the chaos creature. This is a bad snake because there's no ankh on it. So it's one of the chaos creatures coming out or through the tree of life. And what the Son of God is doing is he is crushing the head of the serpent and then slicing it off. Now what it says in the hieroglyphs above here, what it says is that he will strike your heel, but you will crush his head. Straight out of Genesis 3:15, that he will he will strike your heel, but you will crush his head. And that's an idiom for you may have won the battle now, but the Son of God will win the war later. It's all part of that battle between chaos, between the bad snakes and the sons of God. That battle that goes on and on, that's depicted here, and even in their idioms, that says, he will strike your heel, but you will crush his head.
For possibly hundreds of years before the book of Genesis was even written, buried 100 feet under the sands of the Valley of the Kings, this painting has been testifying to the story of the War of the Seeds.
But you have to understand that Moses would not have written that in the Bible to be a mystery to the people at that time. So there had to be some kind of understanding of what this meant to the people at that time.
The fact that the story of the early days of mankind as we know it had likely made its way into the folklore of ancient Egypt begs the question, could it be that it was a relevant topic brought to common awareness by the presence of watchers and giants in pre-dynastic Egyptian life?
I always picture Moses in the 40 years of wandering is dictating. I'm sure he's not doing the actual scribe work, but he's dictating to scribes the first 5 books of the Bible and the book of Genesis. And he's putting it in an Egyptian context of what they understood because they've been living in Egypt for hundreds of years. So he's putting it in an Egyptian context that they would understand. So what did he mean from an Egyptian context when he talks about the giants, the Nephilim, this group. It's something that they would have known about. And there's a lot of indications in ancient Egypt about how their gods may have been real physical beings in the prehistoric times, that they believed they were real giants, these gods were, and now they are worshipped by these puny men that lived today, speaking of Moses' time.
But it would seem that the ancient Egyptians were not only aware of the War of the Seeds, perhaps they were aware of the curse put on the serpent as well. While walking through the countless tunnels under the many tombs in the Valley of the Kings, among the thousands, perhaps millions of hieroglyphs on one of the tomb walls, we come upon this vignette, a depiction of a serpentine being. The serpent has the head and feet of a man. We are reminded of Doug Van Dorn's commentary at the Gilgal Raphaim in Israel.
In Genesis 6, it's the sons of God who marry the daughters of men, and then they give birth to giants. And
some of them are meant to have serpent.
Well, yeah. So they're depicted in Jewish mythology and pseudepigrapha as serpentine-like beings. So even like Satan in the Garden of Eden isn't a snake that's possessed, but he's a serpentine seraphim.
Could this image be in fact an actual representation of a watcher, as the oral accounts were handed down? According to Steve Wondering, the figure of the serpent for Egyptians signified either chaos or it signified good luck if the image was followed by an ankh, the popular cross-like symbol. Here in the Ramesseum, the Temple of Ramses the Great, in what would have been a beautiful building many thousands of years ago, we find this elaborate engraving on a wall. On this depiction of the Tree of Life, an inscriber is quite literally writing a name into the egg of life for the afterlife. The parallel to modern-day Christianity is astonishing.
Every temple is set up to be a garden, like the Garden of Eden. Every temple is a garden because all of these columns were painted. Right now we just see this monotone, right? But you have to imagine everything is painted in amazing colors that people, when they came here, would be blown away by the brightness of this beautiful garden that they were in. And second, in every garden, what you need in the ancient world is a tree of life. This represented the eternal life there. And what's interesting is you see the wisdom god writing your name on an egg in the tree of life, representing that new birth. So they were celebrating the new birth of the death of this pharaoh was a new birth into the afterlife. So the egg represented his new birth into the afterlife, and they wrote his name on the egg in eternity. And it's just amazing to see. You can literally see them writing on the eggs in the tree of life, within inside of the tree of life.
Egypt is an enchanting place. So much mystery and so many secrets. Even harder to fathom, heaven only knows how many more ancient secrets are still buried under the ocean of sand that makes up the vast majority of the landscape of the nation of Egypt.
Talking to Egyptologists and archaeologists in Egypt, they believe anywhere from 30 to 50% is all we have discovered. Some believe we've only discovered about 30% of what was in ancient Egypt. Some believe up to 50, but I rarely will find somebody that says, oh, we've discovered 80, 90% of it. Nobody will say that.
When the sun comes up again, we'll be face to face with the ancient greatness of the wonders of Giza. The breathtaking view of the pyramids at sunrise is nothing short of a spiritual experience. The echoes of thousands of years of blood and sweat, conquest and defeat, all synergize across time and dimensions to take your breath away when your eyes take in this vista for the very first time. The obvious stars of the show are three pyramids, and the iconic part man, part lion Sphinx. guarding the complex in a silent eternity. The Giza Plateau is some 10 miles southwest of the bustling capital city of Cairo. The world-renowned attraction hosts close to 15 million visitors every year. Relatively little commentary has been truly given on the architects and designers of the pyramids. The topic usually gets explained away by simply pointing out that the Giza complex is in fact considered a royal necropolis. In layman's terms, an egocentric and extremely gaudy cemetery. Therefore, the narrative is usually and rightfully centered on burial chambers, archaeological finds, and the insurmountable amount of work and innovation that it must have taken to build these extraordinary structures. The reality is that most of what we know about the pyramids is in fact inconclusive, and oftentimes, even those who have devoted their entire lives to the study of the Giza Plateau can only offer their best hypotheses. Great hypotheses, and yet there is a world of detail about these monuments that simply cannot be conclusively explained by science nor the academic world. Adjacent and practically at the base of the Great Sphinx is the amazing Valley Temple of Khafre. Before even stepping inside of the temple, we are immediately drawn to the megalithic walls of the temple. But it isn't even the size of the stones. We have been literally surrounded by gargantuan stones this whole time. What catches our eye is extraordinary. If we didn't know any better, we would say that we are back in Cuzco. The same detail work, razor-thin seams joining stones, precision stonework, and along with it, the same set of questions. How? 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 How are these stones literally bent and shaped? In the southwesternmost part of the plateau is the smallest pyramid of the three, the Pyramid of Menkaure. Here, we run into an interesting detail that we just absolutely cannot overlook. The casing stones around the base of the pyramids have an uncanny resemblance to the megalithic stones of Cuzco. Again, the nodules that just have absolutely no known explanation. Coincidence? A half a world away? These nodules, again, that we also saw in Peru, seemingly random all through this wall here. Why? And how can there be nodules here and the same exact type of architecture literally halfway across the world in Peru? It's the same structures, it's the same architecture. Who did it? Who gave these civilizations this technology? Very separate civilizations, same technology. Here is another mystery that oftentimes goes unaddressed. As we will soon see, the unbelievable construction, geometry, and mysteries of the Great Pyramid in general stand a cut above the rest of the other pyramids. And yet in Giza, it is the one that is by consensus the oldest one. Would the Egyptians not have improved on the craftsmanship, design, and practices of the subsequent pyramids after the first one, instead of digressing? Let's take a really close look at the Great Pyramid. This might be the biggest fingerprint of the watchers on the entire planet. The Great Pyramid. Weathered and imposing, for thousands of years the Great Pyramid stood as the tallest non-natural, presumably, man-made object on Earth. Mainstream archaeology places the construction of the Great Pyramid somewhere between 2580 and 2560 BC. It is believed to have been commissioned by Khufu, the second pharaoh of the Fourth Dynastic Empire. The reality is, the ancient Egyptians, much like the Incas, were an astute, hardworking, resourceful, creative, and wonderfully artistic people. Their innovative storytelling through symbology is virtually unparalleled. It is iconic and unmistakable thousands of years after their heyday. And much like the Inca did not build the megalithic core of Machu Picchu, the dynastic Egyptians did not build the Great Pyramid, at least in the manner that we've been led to believe. If your closest Egyptologist just gasped, remind him or her that we are all working with theories after all. But consider this. Traditional Egyptology tells us that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was built with blocks that were quarried and shaped using bronze chisels and likely stone hammers. Basically what amounts to Fred Flintstone technology. I think we're almost ready to put this one in. With these types of tools, they managed to make the same type of paper-thin joints and seams that the Incas made. 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, with an average weight of 2.5 metric tons each, ferried down the Nile River to build the pyramids, and all done without the use of what might be possible today, using modern-day cranes and shipping.
What's amazing to me is how big this is. I mean, you can't get a perspective until you're close, but it's almost like you still can't. It's three-dimensional, but it looks only two-dimensional because it's so huge. But inside this pyramid is 2.3 million blocks, 2,300,000 blocks, the smallest of which is 2.5 tons. The biggest ones, the bigger ones, are up to 15 tons. The Egyptians didn't have people that were just pyramid builders. They had farmers that built pyramids, they say. So they could only work 4 months of the year because they were out working in their gardens, they were on their farms, and so only during the flood season when they couldn't work on their farms, they did these government projects. So if you figure 4 months of the year that they were working, that's all. And 20 years is what they say it took to build it. That means they had to put a block in place every 2 minutes. Every 2 minutes, at least a 2.5 ton block had to be placed in place.
How is that possible?
How is it possible?
As Steve Wondering points out, the vast majority of theories on how the pyramids were built basically get explained away as sheer willpower and determination. And many people with strong backs, legs, and arms. There are, of course, more unorthodox explanations. However, they are oftentimes avoided and dismissed, usually without ever actually being disproven per se. The Giza Plateau is located on the western side of the Nile River, and its size is roughly 1.6 kilometers by 1.9 kilometers in a rough rectangle. We are told by Egyptologists as well as historians that the 3 imposing pyramids were built between 2550 to 2490 BC. The pyramids are said to have been built under the dynastic pharaohs Khufu, tallest pyramid, Khafre, the middle pyramid, and Menkaure, the third and smallest pyramid. In addition to this, there are the smaller 6 pyramids, known as the Pyramids of Queens, south of the Pyramid of Menkaure, and 1 small pyramid south of the Pyramid of Khafre, known as the Subsidiary Pyramid. It is fairly common knowledge that the entire complex of Giza is not where it is randomly and by chance. One of the facts that falls into an almost trivia category is that the Great Pyramid of Giza is perfectly aligned to true north to within fractions of a single degree. If we have thought all along that the geometry and precision that it took to build the Great Pyramid was astounding, factor this into what you think you've known until now. A random flyover of the Great Pyramid by a British Air Force pilot by the name of P. Groves in 1940 revealed that the Great Pyramid is not a 4-sided structure as we commonly know it, but rather an 8-sided structure, whose additional sides are visible only in the dawn and dusk sunlight of the spring and autumn equinoxes. Knowing this fun fact makes looking through archival or vintage photography a treasure hunt of sorts, as sometimes the additional lines are hinted under the right lighting conditions. But as fun a fact as that may be, the geometry of the pyramid becomes infinitely more intricate when a 4-sided pyramid turns into an 8-sided pyramid, making it possible to see the subtle and minuscule indentations that reveal the additional 4 sides. Things take an even faster step towards the unexplainable when it becomes evident that this happened absolutely by design, an intentional structural detail that could not have happened by any kind of seismic event, as some have tried to explain away. Consider the unbelievable amount of information presented by the likes of researcher and author Jacques Grimaud in his somewhat controversial book La Révélation des Pyramides, or The Revelation of the Pyramids. Grimault meticulously details how within the measurements of the pyramids, we first find some basic building blocks of geometry that are reasonably the metaphorical building blocks of the modern geometric sciences. Grimault argues not only that the builders of the Great Pyramid knew and employed the modern mathematical concepts of pi, but also the golden ratio. He suggests that the ancient builders might have even developed the concept of the modern-day meter. All of this, thousands of years before the French church vicar Gabriel Moulton in 1670 officially birthed the concept of the metric system. There is too much evidence to deny that the application of pi was used to build the pyramids. But consider the fact that the original calculations of pi were not made until 287 to 215 BC by Archimedes of Syracuse, a wildly famous mathematician of ancient Greece. More interesting things about pi in a moment. First, let's talk about an ancient yet still popular alphanumeric code known as gematria. Gematria is controversial because oftentimes it is associated with the occult and divination, prone to be sensationalized and even used for deception. There are those who argue, however, that gematria can be used to decode prophetic messages hidden in ancient biblical scriptures. In this system, each letter of an alphabet is assigned a numeric value. For example, in the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph has a gematria value of 1, Beth 2, Gimel 3, Daleth 4, and so on up to Yud, where it gets a value of 10. In the gematria system, Kaf would not be 11, but rather 20. Lamed would be 30, Mem 40, and so forth until Kuf, which is 100. When we hit 100, you guessed it, Raish 200, Shin 300, and the last letter Tav 400. In its oldest and purest form, gematria is a system in which numeric values are given to letters, usually ancient languages, for multiple reasons. Hebrew dates, for example, are often written using gematria. There are also controversial claims that the use of gematria can reveal hidden meanings in letters as well as numbers. Take, for example, the name of God, written in Hebrew. Using the gematria numerical system, the name of Elohim in the Hebrew language yields a shocking and unexpected result and reveals the value of the pi constant. In maintaining consistency with the use of pi, we will demonstrate this in a circular configuration. The name of God, the Yahweh God of the original Hebrew language, actually enshrouds the pi constant. We assign the geometric equivalents to the Hebrew letters of the name of Elohim in this circle. Aleph, 1. Lamed, 30. Hai, 5. Yod, 10. Mem, 40. The numbers are then reduced by losing all periods and zeros. The name of God, or Elohim in Hebrew, would be read in a counterclockwise fashion, as Hebrew is read from right to left. We read the numerical value in a clockwise manner, and from the last letter. It reveals the numerical equivalent of pi, a number with no end. Curiously, the number 3 is the root number of the Holy Trinity. It is the starting point of the sequence of the infinite stream of numbers. In March of 2014, the BBC announced that Emma Haruka Iwao, a Google employee from Japan, had found new pi digits with the help of the company's cloud computing service and had broken the world record of computing the value of pi to 31 trillion numbers beyond the decimal. The value of pi is infinite, never-ending. An interesting coincidence that the name of an infinite, omniscient, and never-ending God has a numerical equivalent of an almost mystical number that has thus far proven to be virtually infinite in and of itself. Equally interesting of a coincidence, however, is that the astronomically accurate properties of the Great Pyramid's design and construction were absolutely dependent on the use of the pi constant. If the logistics of cutting, shaping, transporting, and lifting into place multi-ton blocks with Bronze Age technologies is not enough to establish at least a suspicion of a correlation between the divine or supernatural and the pyramids, the mathematical phenomena should be enough to raise the collective eyebrow. To the amazement of enthusiasts of math, there are some interesting geodetic facts about the basic measurements of the Great Pyramid. If one were to take the number of seconds in a 12-hour period, or what may have been considered a day in ancient times, 43,200 seconds, and then multiply that number by the southern edge of the pyramid, 756 feet, 230.43 meters, you get the exact length of the equatorial circumference of the Earth in miles. Likewise, if one takes the height of the pyramid at its highest point, 480 feet, 146.3 meters, and multiply it by 43,200 feet, you get the polar radius of the Earth, both to within 99.8% accuracy. In addition to that, when one multiplies 43,200 times 2, day and night, you get the 86,400, which is also the diameter of the Sun in miles. And that's been proven to be 99.9% accurate. As it turns out, the entire Great Pyramid of Giza is a perfect scale model of one hemisphere of the Earth at a ratio of, again, 1 to 43,200, and consequently, if that were to be mirrored, the double pyramid would be a 1 to 86,400 scale model of the entire planet. In his book, The Great Pyramid of Giza, Decoding the Measure of a Monument, author Eckhart B. Schmitz meticulously details other unbelievable mathematical wonders and phenomena that are hidden, not only using the external measurements of the Great Pyramid, but the entire Giza complex itself. Echoing his findings with some semantic differences, Jacques Grimault also finds that the Great Pyramid houses these phenomena, and even equations that would not be conclusively calculated until thousands of years later, but move inward into the inner portions of the pyramid, and an even bigger world of mathematical accuracies and mysteries exist. Inside of the Great Pyramid, as it pertains to our purposes, we find the following main areas of interest in the middle of a network of passages and tunnels, in order of closest to pavement level to highest. The entrance passage, the ascending passage, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber has several difficult-to-access chambers above it, but it is capped with a chevron-like top. The mathematical accuracy in the design is astounding. Take the total height of the pyramid and divide by 2. We get the exact height of the summit of the top peak of the weight-relieving chamber of the King's Chamber. When we divide by 3, the line gives us the height of the upper chamber's ceiling. When we divide by 4, we get the measurement of the top peak of the middle chamber, or Queen's Chamber. Divided by 5, we get the floor in the lowest chamber. And by 7, we find the floor in the middle chamber. And by the way, for the more advanced physics enthusiasts, the formula for the gravitational constant is one of the several formulas that Schmitz found inside of the Great Pyramid. When one takes the circumference of the inside of the Great Pyramid and draws an external circle that touches all of the corners of the same pyramid, and, in miles, subtract the measurement of the inner from the measurement of the outer, you do in fact get the actual measurements of the speed of light. Surprised? Don't be. Enter the coordinates for the Great Pyramid of Giza in your GPS, and then look up the speed of light in meters. Depending on your geo-tracker, it will fall on the same exact set of numbers 99.99% of the time. The Great Pyramid was not put there by chance, and it was not designed by common men. Let's turn our attention toward the sky, since the great builders of the pyramids were presumably not using the metric system, although Grimault believes that they were. The royal cubit is the unit of measure by which the dynastic Egyptians measured. The royal cubit to feet ratio is 1 royal cubit to 1.86 feet. If you measure one side of the pyramid from its main socket level, the actual true corners of the structure, you will get 365.242 cubits. Well, this just happens to be the same number of days in a solar year. In more precise numbers, the 365.242 days that it takes the Earth to travel around the Sun in 1 year to within a fourth of a day. More happenstance? But why stop there? Since we are looking up, it is a fairly common but debatable theory that the 3 pyramids in Giza have an alignment with the 3 stars of Orion's belt, in part due to visual evidence. But assuming that the theory is correct, it's only the tip of the spear. Grimault believes that each of the quadrants of the Great Pyramid were subdivisions for 4 specific quadrants of alignment with the zodiac. Now, it is not uncommon to know that ancient civilizations use the equinoxes year by year to know how to tell the change of the seasons, especially as it pertained to agriculture. This is on an entirely different level. What if it was shown and suggested that the entire Giza Plateau is one gigantic calendar? But not just a regular solar calendar, like what we commonly know about the Mayans and the Aztecs. How about a calendar which points not to which month the user finds itself in, but rather what constellation age the planet is in? If one were to pick a random star in the sky and come back to find that same star 72 years later, one would find that this star has drifted by 1 degree. This is due to something called the precession of the equinoxes. In other words, the constant wobble of the Earth on its axis within the universe. It will take the Earth, which spins on its axis at an average tilt of 23.5 degrees around our Sun, 26,000 years to complete one entire rotation of its trajectory. Remember that star we talked about? It will take it 26,000 years to go all the way through its trajectory and make its way back to the starting point, 1 degree every 72 years. How is this relevant? Among the oddities of the structures of Giza, there is one relic that we've left out of this conversation thus far. The part man, part lion stone beast, silently keeping watch over the Giza complex, the Sphinx. There has been much controversy about the Sphinx, as some say that it may not have been built by the dynastic Egyptians either, and that it might have been at a completely different time than the construction of the pyramids. Photographic evidence of water erosion patterns directly behind the Sphinx make a strong case that the Sphinx is older, much older. Grimault points out that if we were to draw a pyramid to scale, but 5 times bigger than the Great Pyramid, and place it here, it connects with the small pyramid's pinnacle here on one side, and on the eastern side would run directly over the head of the Sphinx. Likewise, Grimault noted, if you outline the square base of the pyramid and slide it alongside like this on the eastern slope, and if you drew an intersecting north-south line along the right side of the square, that line would again intersect over the head of the Sphinx. In addition, if you were to increase the size of the same square and place its sides over the pinnacles of the Great Pyramid and the Middle Pyramid, then draw a circle around whose center goes over the lowest right corner and joins the pinnacles of both pyramids, again, the intersecting point would be the top of the Sphinx's head. Randomly? By chance? Grimault stumbled onto something controversial but mesmerizing. What exactly does the Sphinx represent? Or maybe it's not what the Sphinx represents. Maybe we should ask, what exactly is the Sphinx looking at? Is the Sphinx a constant? Perhaps the hour hand on this colossal clock that is the Giza Plateau? If the Great Pyramid is aligned virtually perfectly with true north, then the Sphinx is congruently aligned to the east. And with a front row view of the ecliptic plane, the Sphinx is in a perfect spot to track the equinoxial precession. But how would the ancients have known this unless they had observed the precession path in its entirety, at the very least once? The Sphinx would have had to at least be 26,000 years older than we believed all along. Of course, they simply could have gone on blind faith with their calculations, right? Not likely. How could the dynastic Egyptians who were working with stone hammers and bronze chisels manage to get their overhead perspective and analysis of the location of Giza? How did they know the latitude that would correspond to the same number as the speed of light, let alone what the speed of light was, literally thousands of years before modern maps were drawn? Is it a mere coincidence that the exact same length of a side of the Great Pyramid is in fact the same exact number as a solar year in days? How and why is the architectural design of the interior of the pyramid so arrogantly full of geometric accuracies? How would they have been able to calibrate with such precision the precession of the Earth without having invested 26,000 years to prove their theory? How did they quarry, shape with laser precision, transport, install 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite weighing an average of 2.5 metric tons and install them every 2 minutes during 4 months of the year for 25 years without the use of cranes, GPS, lasers, bulldozers, nothing but sweat and ropes? The common sense answer would be, they didn't. Much like the Incas inherited their megaliths, dynastic Egyptians would have wonderfully appropriated the Great Pyramid to such a degree that it literally became part of their identity as a kingdom. Their structures are recognized and even respected as icons of a nation into the modern day. And yes, they may have even repurposed them as tombs. They astutely crafted their architecture and written language to flawlessly complement the architectural style of the pyramids, in whose interior, by the way, you'll find no hieroglyphs. Ultimately, could this have been the epicenter of the world during the time of the Watchers? Could the pyramids that we find all over the world have been a piece of home for all of the civilization that came after the Tower of Babel, yet kept this place in their hearts? Furthermore, if the pyramids are a source of power in the metaphysical world, just how much power could have been generated in the Great Pyramids of Giza? As Dr. Alexa Brennan told us, pyramids with all of this metaphysical firepower, from the material to the measurements to the exact precise location, could have meant a virtually instant portal or point of entry into other dimensions, namely, spiritual dimensions. Has all of this talk of drawing lines and circles conjured any images? How about now? Yes, Freemasonry. Do you know what the center G stands for in the Masonic logo? That's correct. Geometry. You have no doubt seen the movies about secret societies, their roles in shaping the early days of the United States, all of the mysteries and secrets that are whispered about them. We won't go down that path. Not today. We will, however, briefly look at some of the Masonic legends about their beginning, according to an article titled The Initiatic Symbolism of Freemasonry by Thomas D. Worrell, 32nd degree Mason, on the Masonic World online publication. Mr. Worrell states, Freemasonry continues an initiatic tradition whose origins are lost in antiquity. This statement cannot be proven historically. Yet, the more you study Masonic rites and its symbols, the more you become convinced that you are dealing with something ancient, maybe even primordial. It becomes clear that this tradition is much older than Masonry's institutional beginnings in 1717, older than the cathedral builders and medieval guilds, older even than King Solomon's Temple or the Egyptian pyramids. This initiatic tradition that Mr. Worrell speaks of also has a very particular initiatic rite. All new candidates must be a part of said rite. And, as the article says, older than its institutional beginnings in 1717, the tradition dates back to ancient times, very ancient times. The initiatic rites are attributed to a man. Care to take a guess? Enoch. We've come full circle. According to the Masonic Dictionary, one tradition states that he received from God the gift of wisdom and knowledge, and that God sent him 30 volumes from heaven filled with all the secrets of the most mysterious sciences. the Babylonians supposed him to have been intimately acquainted with the nature of the stars, and they attribute to him the invention of astrology. That he foretold the deluge that was to overwhelm his descendants, and that he built the pyramids, engraving thereon figures of artificial instruments and the elements of the sciences, fearing lest the memory of man should perish in that general destruction. Researcher and author Gary Wayne, however, contests that the Enoch that the Masons revere is not in fact the Enoch that was raptured by God. He contends that the Enoch of the Masons is actually the Enoch that was born from the lineage of Cain, who killed Abel and was later cursed by God when his sin was dealt with. Researcher and author Gary Wayne has an interesting insight to the role of Enoch in the construction of the Great Pyramid.
You know, the mysterious techniques and size of the project to build the pyramids is something that we're not really capable of doing today into the same precise dimensions, sacred science built in, and astrological alignments. It's just done in such a style of perfection, including the masonry joints. It's just something that is inexplicable to how we view how developed the ancients were. But what we need to remember is that the ancients were developing the 7 sacred sciences and had disciplined them into the 7 sacred sciences to develop them. And this science interconnected with and meshed with the additional knowledge from the gods by the time of the creation of the giants. And so you had this knowledge and this organizational structure coming together at the birth of the giants that would take over the antediluvian world and then overtook the world again after the flood. So when we look at some accounts that go back into that time of prehistory of before the flood, the Masons, who are essentially Gnostics in terms of their religion, take the knowledge that was being accumulated in that period of time as being the start of their secret societies. And they look at Enoch as developing the knowledge that Cain learned from Adam, that Adam learned from God in the Garden of Eden to do his planting and ranching and all the things to go with the agricultural requirements. And so Enoch develops this to new levels and develops the art of building. And so Enoch is the one that Masons accredit the knowledge that was used to build the pyramids. And of course, this is the knowledge that Enoch also additionally receives from the gods. So you have that merging of that knowledge to create that technology. So you may have had help from the giants, you may have had help physically from the gods, and the gods may even built some of the ancient structures. But according to the Freemasons, they believe that Enoch was responsible for building many of the pyramids, and that meant they would have had technology to move those blocks because the project is just too large to be physically moved, even with the physical strength of the giants. So most will speculate, building on that they would have had technology like anti-gravity to align those rocks, or there's some technology that the gods provided Enoch with the engineering and blueprints to build these sites to assemble it. So I think there's something that's combined in there that is the final solution. How much is weighted from the gods, how much comes from the 7 sacred sciences, noting that geometry is the 7th science. I think it's probably got a lot to do with a little bit of both. Giants, humans, and gods.
A few final thoughts on Enoch, taken by God and before his death. According to the book of Genesis, Enoch was taken 365 years into his life. The measurements of the sides of the Great Pyramid are 365 cubits. 365, as we also discussed, is the same number of days as a solar year. What do all the coincidences of the Great Pyramid mean when it's all said and done? What do all the wonders of the Giza complex in general mean? Perhaps nothing more than just that, merely coincidences. Merely mathematical anomalies whose answers are still laying beyond our scientific or mathematical grasp. Maybe a missing link of sorts will one day be unearthed, tying it all together.
Or perhaps all of the mysteries of Giza, the megalithic mysteries of the entire planet, and even the mysteries that have caught our collective eye outside of our planet, the ones that have aroused human curiosity and imagination, those that we aim to someday explore cautiously and responsibly. Maybe they're simply the muted relics from the season of rebellion by the incarnate sons of God. The ruins from the opening act of the losing war. The created sons of God aiming to kill God's only begotten Son. A war where evil was decisively defeated in the battlefield of an empty tomb in the land of Israel over 2,000 years ago. The silent witnesses of a time when the sons of God sinfully indulged themselves and lived like kings on earth, worshipped as gods by mankind, all along fully aware of the horror of their fate. And although that war has been conclusively won, the fate of much of mankind still hangs in the balance, and the rebellious sons of God still fight him for its soul.
Our time in Egypt comes to an end. As we go our separate ways, we look back at a year of our lives spent on the hunt for traces left behind by the Watchers and the Nephilim still visible in the modern day. We went looking for evidence. We found plenty. A year filming content for a series that we hope will challenge the mind as well as the status quo.
Get my contact details off Rudy.
I will.
An endeavor which we hope will make us all take second looks and welcome second opinions. An even bigger purpose, to challenge you, the viewer, to wonder, to dig, to question. The truth is not in one place. There is seldom a smoking gun. It's out there, buried in pieces, from the subatomic to the megalithic, from the tangible to the quantum, from the academic to the spiritual. And we've only begun to scratch the surface.